The zombie virus had already swallowed the entire city whole. Streets that were once full of life were now crawling with the infected, and survival had become the only thing that mattered. In the middle of this chaos, a man named Francis made a desperate decision to take his family away from the city before it was too late. He packed everything he could, loaded his wife Iris and their two sons into the car, and drove toward the countryside. The car carried bloodstains on its body, silent evidence of everything they had already been through. Francis's older son Joshua sat quietly, while the younger one, Lucas, stayed close to his mother. Their destination was the old family farmhouse in the village, a place Francis believed would keep them safe from the nightmare spreading across the country. When they finally arrived at the farmhouse, something felt wrong immediately. The inside of the house was a mess, things thrown round, furniture out of place, and a heavy silence hanging in every room. Francis called out to his parents, but got no response. He moved carefully through the house until he reached his father's room. There, lying on the bed, was his father, a gun resting in his hand. Francis understood without needing an explanation. His father had been infected and had chosen to end his own life before the virus could take complete control of him. Francis quietly picked up the gun and took the watch from his father's wrist as a memory. But the pain did not stop there. As he stepped out of the room, he heard a strange, broken sound. He followed it and found his mother, her body half destroyed, her face twisted, and she was repeatedly banging her head against the wall while whispering the word sorry over and over. Before Francis could even process what he was seeing, she lunged toward him. In a split second, he raised the gun and pulled the trigger. He buried both his parents in the ground that same day, carrying the weight of grief and the terrifying realization that the virus had reached the village. Not long after, Joshua approached his father and suggested they search the storeroom for supplies. The two of them went together, but what they found there was another disturbing sight. The farmhouse caretaker had taken his own life and was hanging inside the storeroom. Francis stood still for a moment, then calmly told Joshua to take the keys from the dead man's waist. Joshua stepped forward nervously, and the moment he pulled at the keys, the body came crashing down on top of him. He screamed and bolted out of the room, shaking uncontrollably. When Iris saw the state Joshua was in, she turned to Francis with fire in her eyes and demanded to know what had happened. Francis told her plainly. A dead body had fallen on the boy, nothing more. Iris was furious and told Francis to stop putting Joshua through such things. But Francis looked at her calmly and said that if they wanted to survive in this world, everyone in the family had to toughen up, because the world outside had no mercy left. Afterward, he handed Lucas a piece of sugarcane and smiled, watching the little boy eat. It was a small moment, but it revealed something important. Francis had a noticeably softer place in his heart for Lucas compared to Joshua, and that difference would slowly become more significant as the story moved forward. Later that evening, Iris brought Francis down to a room in the basement. The moment Francis stepped inside, something shifted in his expression. The room pulled him back into his childhood, back to the days when his father used to take him there as punishment. He stood in silence, carrying memories he had never fully let go of. When night came, the family gathered round the table to eat together. Joshua found an old radio and started playing with it, but Francis immediately shut it down and told him to focus on eating. Then Joshua mentioned that his girlfriend Alice had sent him a message. She and her family were heading to a government camp set up in the mountains to the north. The moment Francis heard this, his face hardened. He told everyone clearly and firmly that he had no intention of going to any government camp. In his mind, Such places were nothing more than cages where people would be crowded together, fighting over scraps of food. He declared that they would stay at the farmhouse, and that was final. Iris said nothing, but the look on her face made it obvious she disagreed completely. That night, after the children were asleep, Iris quietly told Francis that he needed to stop being so harsh with Joshua. The boy was growing up and deserved to be treated with some respect. Francis went to sleep without much of a response, but the night brought him no peace. He had a violent nightmare in which his deceased father appeared before him in a terrifying form. He woke up gasping and grabbed Iris tightly. In the morning, Iris told him again that she could not stay in this place. The bad dream combined with Iris's persistence finally broke Francis's resistance. Against his own will, he agreed to take the family to the mountain camp. They loaded into the van and set off. But the journey did not go as planned. As they reached a bridge, they found the road completely blocked, cars piled up everywhere and a heavy barricade cutting off the path. Francis immediately said they should turn back, but Iris refused to give up. She climbed out of the van and tried to move the barricade herself, but it would not budge. Then, without any warning, a zombie appeared directly in front of her. She screamed and ran. Francis jumped out, shot the zombie, and pulled her back, but the gunshots had attracted attention. More zombies began converging on the van where the children were sitting. Francis, thinking fast, drew the zombies away from the vehicle, leading them in the opposite direction. The zombies closed in on him from all sides, but he managed to pull out a grenade and throw it into the crowd. The explosion tore through them, and the area fell silent. The family was safe, but the van had stopped working completely. With no other option, they walked back to the farmhouse on foot. When they returned, Francis sat Iris down and told her plainly that from that point forward, things would go away. The next morning, he went back to the bridge alone to retrieve the van. He got inside, started the engine successfully, and sat there for a moment. Then a thought crossed his mind. If he brought the van back, Iris would use it as another reason to try leaving. He turned off the engine, got out, and walked back to the farmhouse without it. When Iris asked about the car, he told her it would not start. That evening, Francis fixed the lights and the air conditioning in the house and spent time with the children, dancing with them, singing, filling the house with noise and warmth. Iris stood at a distance watching, and something in the scene told her that Francis had mentally decided this farmhouse was home, and he was never going to leave. Later that night, Joshua and Lucas came across an old photo album. They flipped through the pages together until Joshua noticed a picture of Francis standing beside a man named Diego. Lucas looked at the photo and casually remarked that Joshua looked exactly like that man. The comment was innocent, but it planted a seed in Joshua's mind that would not stop growing. He began connecting the scattered pieces, why his parents seemed to be in a constant state of tension, why Francis treated him so differently from Lucas. And slowly, the answer took shape. He began to suspect that his real father was not Francis at all, but Diego. And that was the reason for everything. The following morning, Francis woke up and surprised Iris with an apology. He admitted that he had been the cause of much of their suffering and took responsibility for his actions. Iris, moved by his words, apologized too. Francis embraced her and told her that from that day forward, they would begin again, stay together, take care of the boys, and build something in this broken world. It felt like the beginning of something better. Francis went out to the barn to collect eggs, but the moment he stepped inside, a rabid dog burst out from the shadows and attacked him, sinking its teeth deep into his wrist before he could react. He rushed back to the house, his hand bleeding and his face pale. Iris cleaned and bandaged the wound quickly, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. She told him they needed to leave for a hospital immediately. A bite from a rabid animal could be fatal if left untreated. But Francis refused. He insisted that if the wound was properly cleaned and dressed, it would heal on its own. He was not going anywhere. Round the same time, Joshua went outside and managed to catch a radio signal on the road. What he heard made him run straight back inside. There was a broadcast about something called the Delta Camp, a place that appeared to be functioning and safe. He told his parents immediately, but Francis dismissed it without even listening. He accused Joshua of making things up and told him to stop lying. At dinner that night, the family discussed it again, but Francis shut the conversation down. He told everyone that the outside world was finished, completely gone, and that their only hope of survival was staying right where they were. The next morning, Joshua came to his father with something important on his mind. He told Francis that he was no longer a child, that he wanted to contribute to the family's survival, and that he deserved to make his own decisions. Francis brushed him off. He told Joshua that making decisions required the kind of strength that Joshua did not yet have, including the ability to kill when necessary. Joshua looked his father in the eye and said that if killing someone was what it took to protect his family, then he could do it. Francis decided to test that claim. He took Joshua out into the open field, set up a target, and handed him a gun. Joshua aimed and fired, and missed. He missed again. Francis's patience cracked, and he began shouting, telling Joshua that if he could not protect the people he loved, he had no right to speak the way he did. Stung by the words, Joshua took a slow breath and started firing with real focus. The shots rang out one after another. Hearing the noise, Iris came outside with Lucas and froze. A zombie was moving toward them from across the field. Then another, then more. Our whole group was approaching the farmhouse. Francis shouted for everyone to run. They rushed inside, pushed heavy furniture against the door, and hurried upstairs. From the upper windows, they could see the zombies beginning to surround the entire house. The door below started shaking under the weight of the undead pressing against it. Then, out of nowhere, a car came speeding down the road outside, horn blowing. The zombies turned and chased after it as it sped away. Francis watched the car carefully, and he recognized it. He knew exactly who was behind the wheel. The next morning, he went to the riverbank and found the man waiting for him. It was Diego, his older brother. Diego had been the one driving that car, the one who had pulled the zombies away from the house and saved the family's lives. He had come to the village looking for their parents. Francis told him quietly that their parents were gone. Diego offered to stay and help, but Francis could not even look at him. The anger that had been buried inside him for years came pouring out. After the marriage, Diego had betrayed him. He had carried on an affair with Iris, and Joshua was the living proof of it. Francis told Diego to leave and never come back before going. Diego handed him a map and warned him that the city's zombie population was slowly migrating toward the village. The mountains in the north were the only real option left. But Francis could not hear reason from this man. He took the map with the intention of burning it, held a lighter to its edge, and then stopped. Something made him fold it and keep it. He returned home and showed Diego's jacket to Iris without a word. Iris looked at it, said nothing, and walked into her room. Francis said nothing either. But now the threat was real. The zombies were coming closer. He began reinforcing the doors and windows, hammering boards into place, sealing every possible entry point. While he worked, Lucas wandered into the basement and pressed his face against the small window near the ground. He let out a terrified scream. Iris came running and found an elderly zombie crouched outside the window, staring. She knelt down and told Lucas calmly that this one was old and frail and not dangerous. Francis was listening from a distance. He slipped outside quietly, followed the zombie, killed it, and cut off its head. When he came back inside, he gathered the family and announced that there were still deadly zombies roaming outside and that they must stay inside the farmhouse at all costs. Iris stared at him as he spoke. She knew he was lying. She had seen the zombie herself, and it was nothing like what Francis was describing. Later, while Francis was in the bathroom, Joshua went into his parents' room and found the map Diego had given his father. He studied it carefully before Francis came out and ordered him to leave. That night, Francis suddenly announced that they were going to celebrate Christmas. The family looked at each other in confusion. It was September. Francis smiled and said it was Christmas for him today. The cracks in his mental state were becoming impossible to ignore. During dinner, Joshua quietly told his mother about the map. Iris looked across the table and asked Francis about it. Francis's expression darkened. He denied having any map. Then, slowly and deliberately, he turned to the children and told them that their mother had wanted to leave them, that she had planned to run off with someone else, but the virus had stopped her from going. The children burst into tears and begged their mother to tell them it was not true. Iris looked at her children and, with quiet devastation, told them that what their father had said was true. Francis then stood up, announced that no one was leaving, pulled the map from his pocket, and threw it into the fire. Iris crossed the room into steps and slapped him hard across the face. She walked out without another word. The next day, Francis went out to the farm to gather sugar cane. While he was gone, Iris sat with the children and spoke honestly with them. It was becoming clear to everyone in that house that Francis was no longer the man they had once known. His grip on reality was loosening, and the children felt far safer with their mother. When Francis came back that evening, he dragged a large wooden board inside and barricaded the front door. He told the family that he had spotted extremely dangerous zombies outside and that anyone who tried to leave would face him. Joshua, his patience exhausted, spoke up and told everyone that his father was making it all up, that he was using fear to keep them trapped inside. The words hit Francis like a match to gasoline. He crossed the room and slapped Joshua with full force, calling him names and spitting out the accusation that he was not his real son. The house was vibrating with tension when, suddenly, there was a knock at the door. A soldier was standing outside, barely on his feet, covered in wounds. He begged for help. Joshua, ignoring his father completely, opened the door and let the man inside. The soldier said he had been stationed at Delta Camp and had gone into the city to search for food with his unit. Zombies had slaughtered everyone else, and he had only survived because a stranger had risked his own life to rescue him. Before dying, that stranger had given the soldier the address of this farmhouse. No one needed to say his name. They all knew it was Diego. Iris asked the soldier whether Diego was still alive. The soldier lowered his head and said that by the time he managed to escape, Diego had been surrounded by zombies and most likely did not make it. Iris bandaged the soldier's wounds and asked Francis to let him stay the night. Francis agreed, but ordered the soldier to sleep in the basement. That night, Joshua went to his mother's room and sat beside her. He told her not to worry about him. He said he already knew that Francis was not his biological father, and that he understood why things were the way they were. But despite everything, Joshua still called Francis his father, and he meant it. He told Iris that he wanted to go outside that night to check the condition of the road. Iris hesitated, but gave him her blessing. Joshua disappeared into the darkness. The next morning, Francis woke up and looked round. Joshua was nowhere to be found. He asked Iris where the boy was, but she gave him nothing. He saw the front door sitting open and understood. Joshua had gone. The rage that built up inside Francis in that moment had nowhere rational to go. He walked down to the basement, found the soldier lying there, and brought the hammer down on his skull without a single word. Iris and Lucas stood frozen in horror. Francis then shoved Iris so hard that she hit the floor and lost consciousness. When she opened her eyes, she realized that Francis had locked her and Lucas in the basement. Meanwhile, outside, Francis found the same rabid dog that had bitten him. Something inside him completely broke. He went after the animal and killed it with a brutal, uncontrolled fury. Then, in a moment that revealed how far gone he truly was, he cooked the dog's meat and brought it down to Iris and Lucas, insisting they eat. Iris refused. Francis hurled the plate across the room in a rage, and a knife spun across the floor. Iris quietly slid her foot over it. She began speaking to Francis in a calm, careful voice, telling him that he was the most important person in her life, that she needed him, that she loved him. For a moment, it seemed to be working. And then Francis's eyes dropped to the floor and landed on the edge of the knife beneath her foot. He crouched down, picked it up, and locked her in the basement again. Iris tried to get away, and in the struggle lost her footing, fell and blacked out. When she came to, Lucas was crouched beside her asking what they should do. Iris thought quickly and whispered a plan to him. Lucas began screaming at the top of his lungs. Francis came running. The moment he burst through the door, Iris was ready. She threw herself at him and struck him hard enough to knock him out. She dragged him into the basement, locked the door behind her, grabbed Lucas and ran upstairs. In the dark and quiet of the basement, Francis lay still, and the past began to flood back in. Memories of his childhood, his father, the punishment room, all of it washing over him in waves. Upstairs, Iris pulled Lucas toward the front door, desperate to get outside and find a way out. But when she swung the door open, a figure was standing in the entrance. It was Diego, but it was not the Diego she remembered. He had turned. He was a zombie now. Iris grabbed Lucas and stumbled backward into the house. Zombie Diego moved inside. He reached for Lucas and sank his teeth into the boy's arm. Iris threw herself between them, trying to pull her son away, and Diego attacked her too. In the basement, Francis heard the screaming above him. He threw himself against the door again and again until it gave way. He came upstairs, found Diego, and drove a knife into him until it was over. Then he turned to Iris, his voice breaking, and asked her why she had done all of this to him. But before she could answer, Lucas stepped forward, and they both saw the bite mark on his arm. Everything inside Francis stopped. All the rage, all the paranoia, all the control, it vanished in an instant. He dropped to his knees and begged Iris to save their son. His voice was not the voice of a man trying to dominate anyone. It was the voice of a father. Iris had no choice. She took a knife, cut away the infected part of Lucas's hand, and wrapped the wound tightly. Francis watched it happen, and something inside him shattered completely. When it was done, Iris told him they needed a vehicle immediately. Lucas had to get to a doctor. Francis ran outside and found the van. But standing near it, holding a gun, was Joshua. When Joshua saw his father approaching, covered in blood, wild-eyed, he assumed the worst. He thought Francis had lost his mind entirely and had hurt or killed Iris. Before Francis could say a single word, Joshua pulled the trigger. Francis crumpled to the ground. Joshua rushed to him, and Francis reached up and took his son's hand. With what little strength he had left, he told Joshua that he had always seen him as his son, truly, genuinely his own, and asked him to forgive whatever pain he had ever caused him. Joshua collapsed over him, sobbing, telling his father he was sorry, that he had not understood, that he had made a terrible mistake. But it was too late. Francis was gone. Joshua knelt on the ground, completely broken. When he finally stood up, he drove the van back to the farmhouse where Iris was waiting with Lucas. She did not yet know what had happened. She did not know that the man who had brought her out here, the man who had protected them and frightened them in equal measure, was gone. And now, with both Francis and Diego lost to this world, the full weight of survival fell on Iris alone. 2 children, a collapsing world, and no one left beside her. The story ends there, quiet, heavy, and unresolved.